let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive, really fascinating array of recent postgraduate research to uncover the ground-level reality of modern African business. We are moving way past the theory here. We're looking at hard data, from digital health all the way to urban nightlife, to see how business is actually getting done. And maybe most importantly, who is actually capturing the value.
So is technology enough to drive inclusive growth? For years, the promise was pretty simple. Just drop in a smartphone app and boom, economic inclusion will magically follow. But as you'll see, the research tells a totally different story. Technology is absolutely a vital tool, but the ecosystem it operates in, the institutions, the governance, the specific business models, that's what actually determines whether it drives inclusive growth. The research we're exploring today covers a staggering breadth of innovation across the continent. We're talking about deploying AI in the bustling, informal retail markets of Lagos, building premium chocolate brands in Ghana, and even coral restoration in Zanzibar. And while these sectors are vastly different, these innovators all share a massive underlying struggle, building sustainable models in incredibly complex environments.
To make sense of all this, we've broken our analysis into 4 main areas. We'll start with digital innovation and infrastructure, move on to the green economy transition, look at governance, society, and inclusion, and wrap up with our key findings and recommendations.
But before we get into the weeds, here's the meta question I want you to keep in the back of your mind throughout this explainer. Who actually captures the value? Because it's one thing to launch a successful startup. It's a completely different challenge to ensure that the equity, the data, and the profits actually stay within local African-owned enterprises.
Okay, let's head into our first section, digital innovation and infrastructure. Let's look at Kenya's mobile money giant, M-Pesa. When we apply the World Bank's digital public infrastructure framework to this platform, a really fascinating tension emerges. M-Pesa is foundational. It's used by over 90% of the market, basically as a public utility. Yet, it remains under private corporate control by Safaricom. And this sparks a massive, really important debate about how we should govern private platforms once they become nationally critical.
Now, this public-private tension is just as critical over in healthcare. Platforms like MTBia in Kenya and Babil in Rwanda are doing absolutely incredible work to reduce financial barriers for low-income patients. But here's the brutal reality the research points out. If their business models rely on perpetual donor funding, that healthcare impact literally vanishes the second the grant money dries up. They have to balance social impact with actual commercial sustainability. And when we look at supply chains like the Ghanaian cocoa industry, we always hear that African agriculture needs to move up the value chain, right? But the data shows a really stark reality. The chocolate is made, sure, but who takes the biggest bite? African-owned enterprises fighting to process and brand locally face immense hurdles breaking into European retail. Meanwhile, foreign entities are easily capturing the premium brand equity of African-origin goods. The value is created locally, but the ownership? That remains stubbornly external. Let's shift gears and move into Section 2, the green economy transition. For this one, let's travel over to Zanzibar. Innovators here aren't just talking about conservation in theory. They're actively testing out nature-positive business models in the blue economy through coral restoration. It's really cool stuff. But it isn't just about environmental protection. It's about figuring out if these restored ecosystems can actually support local livelihoods in a way that's commercially viable.
When we compare the initiatives at Chumbe Island and Jambiani, 2 very distinct paths emerge. On one hand, you have an ecotourism-led model designed to be self-financing by tying conservation directly to tourism revenue. On the other, you have a donor-supported, livelihood-driven approach. Figuring out which of these models is actually replicable and scalable, well, that's the million-dollar question for policymakers trying to build a sustainable blue economy. Now, zooming in on the Northern Kenya Rangelands Carbon Project reveals a bit of a cautionary tale. Global climate finance is absolutely booming right now, but that money doesn't always reach the ground. The research highlights some major roadblocks. 45% of the challenges stem from limited local awareness, 30% from unclear benefit sharing, and 25% from customary land rights issues. It really goes to show that without proper governance, genuine community participation, and formalized land rights, local communities are going to struggle to capture the benefits of climate finance.
All right, moving on to Section 3, governance, society, and inclusion.
The famous economist Douglas North once said, "Institutions are the rules of the game that govern all economic exchange," and that perfectly frames our analysis of Nigeria's End SARS movement. The research looks at this not just as a protest, but as a highly connected youth population mobilizing to reform extractive institutions so they could build a more functional, inclusive business environment. It highlights that the openness of a country's political institutions isn't some separate issue from its business environment. It's the absolute foundation of it.
Down in Johannesburg's Maboneng precinct, developers managing the nighttime economy are walking a serious tightrope. They're using specific architectural designs and private security to ensure commercial profitability. But if they aren't incredibly careful, these very measures create spatial exclusion, literally walling off communities and recreating historical inequalities under the guise of urban renewal. It's a stark reminder that profitability cannot come at the cost of social inclusivity. And that brings us to a hard truth about measuring inclusion in programs like tech boot camps, specifically looking at Akira Chicks in Kenya. We can't just rely on an organization's self-reporting to know if they're truly moving the needle. We have to look at independent, cost-effectiveness data and track structural barriers. This is how we ensure that donor investments are actually translating into sustained careers and real economic gains for disadvantaged young women.
Okay, let's pull all of this together in our final section, key findings and recommendations.
When we look at the patterns across everything we've discussed today, the fundamental needs are surprisingly universal. Private tech platforms require public oversight, green initiatives demand true community buy-in and formalized rights to actually work. And across all sectors, inclusive institutional reform is what clears the path for sustainable economic growth. So the ultimate value to African business is clear. Transparency and inclusive governance are not just corporate buzzwords, they are the literal prerequisites for long-term commercial success.
I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. As Africa's markets continue to rapidly evolve and scale, how will we ensure the resulting wealth actually remains on the continent? Innovation is thriving, absolutely, but the true metric of success is whether that value empowers the local communities and the African enterprises that built it in the first place. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.